Today, I'm going to be testing the patience of Magic the Gathering players. It doesn't take much to see that a little inconvenience can cause a Magic the Gathering player to storm onto Reddit to cry about how their children's card game has been ruined and they are selling everything they own in protest. So, I thought it would be perfect to play a deck so annoying that the win condition is the loss of hope and perseverance in my opponents. The format I'm going to be playing is Vintage, and yes, this deck I am playing today has 0 win conditions. First, I need to explain why I'm playing an artifact deck with no win conditions compared to another deck like Storm, which I'm sure a lot of you wanted to see. On Magic the Gathering Online, people will wait for you to kill them as you can just F6 and wait for the kill not using any of your time bank. So a deck like Storm will never get an early concession because in Vintage there are so many unique cyber cards to tackle Storm decks, so players will always want to see the kill. An artifact deck with no win conditions, on the other hand, will mean that I will completely make the game unplayable for our opponents, and that will actually test their patience because then they will have to constantly click buttons rather than sit back and relax and watch me storm off. So with this deck, we are going to be squeezing the life and hope out of our opponents, and the only way we can win is if they click the concede button. This deck has no win conditions, no way to make creatures, no way to turn things into creatures, no way to make our opponents lose life. There's nothing left to do than to test the patience of Magic the Gathering players, so don't forget to subscribe, and let's begin. To start the first round of this video, we have a mulligan to 6, but keep a very nice set of 6. We have a Mox Emerald, 2 Ancient Tombs, and a Mystic Forge to help us draw some cards. Both Sphere of Resistance and the Thorn are great because it disrupts the opponent and makes it harder for them to cast spells. And with the opponent starting off with a Thoughtseize, we can take our turn and play the Mox Ancient Tomb in one of the spheres. Not being able to do anything else, I pass back to the opponent, in which they use a Wasteland to destroy my Ancient Tomb. Now with a Strip Mine off the top, we have the angle of attacking the opponent's mental game, destroying their last land in play, and hopefully going to cause them to concede. With the opponent just drawing a Scalding Tarn and putting that into play, I can cast my Mox Sapphire and then cast my Sphere of Resistance. As the Sphere makes things too expensive for the opponent, they have to counterspell it, and then the game actually ends because they play a Collector Roof. Collector Roof is a great card to play in the main in Vintage because everyone's playing Black Lotus or the Moxen and a load of degenerate artifacts. It's also a big problem for me here because while I do have cards like Ensnaring Bridge to tackle Collector Roof, I should just concede because I don't want to give the premise to my opponent that I'm going to play out games that are seemingly unwinnable. And Game 2 starts off perfect. Trinosphere is one of the best cards in Vintage and is actually restricted, meaning you can only play 1 copy in your deck. It's self-explanatory, it makes every spell cost 3 mana or greater, and because everyone's trying to play spells that are free and don't play a lot of lands, many people get annoyed by the spell and just concede. Nice to win Game 2, but in Game 3 we've got an uphill battle because the opponent starts off with a Black Lotus on turn 1. Definitely something difficult that we'll have to deal with because we want to be attacking the opponent's mana, and not only do they have a Black Lotus, but they have a Deathrite Shaman, so we have to be able to fight through all these cards. Wanting to attack the opponent's mana, I'm going to play my Soul Ring and my Mox Emerald, dismember the Deathrite Shaman, and play my Thorn. Now they do have a Mindbreak trap because I've cast so many spells, but that's fine because we don't really care about the Deathrite Shaman too much. The problem is when we cast our Thorn, they have a second Mindbreak trap, so they actually countered both of our turn 1 plays. We do have an Ensnaring Bridge and the One Ring, so if they don't have a Collector Roof, we are chilling. Being scared of a hardcast Force of Will or hardcast Force of Negation, I'm still gonna slam the One Ring, and somehow it resolves. And the funny thing here is the One Ring could actually kill us, because if I don't find an answer for this Deathrite Shaman, they're going to drain me for life every turn, and then I'll just die. So this One Ring is both a positive and a negative. We're gonna draw a load of cards, but we better find an answer quickly. Now you might be surprised why I'm playing 4 Ghost Quarter in the deck. Obviously we play Crucible of Worlds, but compared to other formats, people really don't play basic lands in Vintage. So we can Ghost Quarter the opponent on their upkeep, and they don't have a basic land to find. I do understand they have a Deathrite Shaman in play, but we want to try and reduce their mana as much as possible, and if they do have a Fetch Land or a Wasteland like they have here, they would get the mana with Deathrite Shaman anyways. Something surprising though, is they don't use the Wasteland, so I get to untap with my Ghost Quarter. And with a Wasteland for my draw step, I can actually destroy both of my opponent's lands. I draw with the One Ring, get finding a Strip Mine and an Inventor's Fair, which is going to be very useful down the line. Following up with the Crucible of Worlds, the opponent uses the Deathrite Shaman and the Black Lotus to hardcast Force of Will, but now we can completely remove their board with just a Deathrite Shaman left in play. Now with the opponent missing their land drop, they can't activate the Deathrite Shaman to drain me for life. So I can keep drawing a load of cards with the One Ring, I find a Pithing Needle which can name Deathrite Shaman, and we also find another One Ring. So now we can replay the One Ring to sacrifice the One Ring with loads of counters on it. We also have Ensnaring Bridge. So now we can make it seem like to the opponent that this game is hopeless for them. Playing the bridge, having the Deathrite Shaman, having a load of mana, I would assume they would think that this Inventor's Fair is going to kill them. And with the opponent playing a Flooded Strand, attacking for 1, and we get to draw a million cards with the One Ring, we now get to play a load of spheres into Lair and Academy, and the opponent is done with the match after we recast the One Ring. Now this deck is really good against Force of Will mid-range decks, but against combo decks like Doomsday, it's very easy for them to counter or discard our spheres and then cast a Doomsday and we lose. This is even shown in Game 2, when we have an insane opening hand that can cast both Mystic Forge and Sphere of Resistance on turn 1. They do have a counterspell for my Mystic Forge, but that doesn't matter because the Sphere of Resistance should buy us a load of time. Well, that's the problem. When you're playing a deck that has no win conditions, you buy yourself some time, and you can't really do anything with it. Couldn't put any pressure on the opponent. I could pressure their mana, but eventually they just hit all their land drops, cast Doomsday, and I died. Really not much I could have done here. Obviously, we're going to have bad matchups when we have literal 0 win conditions. Things got so grindy in the next round against 4-color control with Yorion. It got so grindy, but because I had access to the One Ring, I just was able to keep drawing a load of cards to keep wastelanding the opponent and keep casting extra disruptive spells. What came clutch is the 4 Pithing Needle in the main, being able to name Oko Thief of Crowns, Beseiju, Teferi Time Raveler, anything that I was concerned about the opponent having, I could name and make a load of spells in their hand uncastable. And what was even funnier is in Game 2, they used a Surgical Extraction to see my 60, and I wonder if they actually noticed I had no win conditions. But things got a bit controversial in Game 2, and that's because of the card in my hand Academy Runes. I can pay 2 mana to put an artifact on top of my deck, and I specifically put this in the list so that I'm able to loop the One Ring. But the problem is here is technically it's a win condition, right? Because I can mill the opponent out with it. I don't know. Does it count as a win condition? Let me know in the comment section down below. But I actually locked the opponent out of the game and then started looping artifacts on top of the deck with Academy Runes. Maybe I cheated, but the opponent conceded the game instead of milling out, so did I cheat? I don't know. But going into the final round, we actually got the best matchup for this deck. We have an amazing opening hand, turn 1 Sphere, Ancestral Recall with our Mox Opal, Ensnaring Bridge if they're a creature deck, and loads of mana disruption. Starting off with a Sphere of Resistance, the opponent does have a Force of Negation to prevent it from hitting the table, but things get a lot better for me when they play a Bazaar of Baghdad. Now the opponent could be on Dredge, but after they discard some cards, they are on Squeevine. So now we can beat down the opponent's mental because we have a Wasteland, Ensnaring Bridge, and a Pithing Needle off the top. So playing the Pithing Needle, that will obviously name Bazaar of Baghdad, but they do have a counterspell, so now we can Wasteland the opponent and make them feel worse about themselves. After passing back, they do have a second Bazaar of Baghdad, but we have a second way to destroy their mana, as well as an Ensnaring Bridge. So let's play the Ensnaring Bridge first, because we don't care if they activate the Bazaar of Baghdad, and then we can Ghost Quarter them next turn. Now we get into a bit of a problem, because we do Ghost Quarter the Bazaar of Baghdad, and they have nothing. But we also have nothing. So when I find a Mox off the top, I can now cast my Ancestral Recall because Mox Opal is online, and they use Force of Will. And now with the One Ring, I'm going to play it and start drawing cards. But because I'm drawing a load of cards, I'm fueling up my hand for Ensnaring Bridge. So the opponent is going to continue playing because my hand is so full with cards from the One Ring, then they'll most likely be able to attack through the Ensnaring Bridge. So I'm going to start drawing cards to try and mentally beat them down, and I do find a Grafdigger's Cage, but I think here generally we might lose, because the opponent might just not concede if we didn't find this Grafdigger's Cage. And going into Game 2, I have the most insane hand ever with a Tabernacle, Wasteland, Black Lotus, and a load of disruption, and with the opponent playing a turn 1 Bazaar of Baghdad, and then the most amount of creatures you've ever seen in your life, I can play the Tabernacle and they'll have to sacrifice their board because they have no mana in play. What's funny is I don't know if my opponent's game was actually crashing, but the opponent kept leaving and joining the match. I don't know if they were annoyed or if their internet was going down, but after we cast some spheres, the opponent does eventually concede. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Here's the chest for you gambling degenerates, and let me know down below if you want me to do this with Vintage Storm.